Allah. Going live now.
Your webinar is currently in off-air mode, and attendees will join in the waiting room. You are currently the only person in this conference.
Connected. Share webcam. Allah. Start. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you guys hear me? I've got multiple cameras going on, so hopefully all that is working. All right. Alhamdulillah. 5 on 5, mashallah. Okay, great. All right. I hope people on Facebook Live can hear as well. If not, please just write in the comments if you are not listening, if you can't hear me. But that should be working fine. Okay, so as per the request from, let's just make sure. Yes, we can hear. Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, it's working. All right. So this was as per the request of a couple of you from the book club to make this last office hours before Ramadan, inshallah, about Ramadan, rather than the specific topic of the books that we go through. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina wa Habibina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره ومقداره العظيم. اللهم إني أعوذ بك أن أضل أو أضل أو أزل أو أزل أو أظلم أو أجهل أو يجهل علي. There's a really cool quote from Soul Machine, George McCarty. If you guys recall, we covered this back in 2017. And the quote is actually quite befitting for the topic. And George McCarty says, modernity has answered many questions, but it has never found a way to fully reconcile the complex triumvirate of body, soul, and mind. Instead, it has left us haunted, divided, with competing histories, values, and rationales that have been at odds ever since. And that really is kind of speaks to the whole difference between Islam and everything else that you see out there. Whenever the topic of religion comes up, or the topic of spirituality generally comes up, we have this kind of two minds that we consider. We think of ourselves as body and spirit, that the two things are separate. And if you remember Ali Izzat Begovich, where he says that the human being is unique in that we are a window between the metaphysical and the physical. We're a window between the spiritual and the material. There's something unique about the creation of Adam alayhi salam and Hawa alayhi salam that created kind of a ripple effect that impacted everything in creation. And we see that it could be into the positive and to the negative. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in the Quran, in Surah Ar-Rahman, وَالسَّمَاءَ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانَ أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ, that the heavens he erected, he elevated, and he placed a balance on the earth. Do not transgress the balance. That is because we have the option, we have the choice, we've been given the free will. As Allah tells in Surah Al-Ahzab, إِنَّا عَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ عَلَى السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَالْجِبَالِ فَأَبَيْنَ أَن يَحْمِلْنَهَا وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. That we have presented this trust, which is, the scholars tell us, is the ability to make a choice, free will. على السماوات والأرض والجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها, that we have presented this trust to the heavens, the mountains, the earth. They all rejected it. They all said, no, we don't want this. And they were in trepidation, they were in fearfulness of it. It's this massive immensity to it. وَحَمَلَهَا الْإِنسَانِ, and the human being carried it. إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. But verily, most certainly, the human being is oppressive and ignorant. We transgress and we oppress ourselves before we oppress everything else. And as we oppress ourselves, we actually see the impact of that everywhere else. There's a documentary on Netflix, Our Planet. The whole thing is just basically showing how beautiful the planet is and all the balance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. And then it's showing us how our own activities and our behaviors is destroying all of this. So Ramadan is a time to kind of check back. It's a time to remove ourselves from being so trapped into the nafs, the nafsani, the egotistical, the lower basal terrestrial aspects of our being, which is not similar. It does not manifest itself in a similar way to the rest of the animal kingdom. If you look at, because we talk about the terrestrial and the spiritual, the terrestrial is this kind of power that we have that allows for us to continue to exist. The terrestrial is why you go eat. The terrestrial is why you go drink. The terrestrial is why you go and seek a spouse so that you can cohabitate and bring forth future generations. That's the terrestrial. The rest of the animal world, though, the way that the terrestrial manifests, it always manifests in a balanced way with nature. So you never find lions hunting more than they need. You don't find lions, unless you find like an aberrant case here or there. But by and large, lions in their pride, they will go, they will hunt for their prey, they will get it, and once they have it, the rest of the herd that they were running after, the buffaloes or whatever it is that they were running after, they all stop. They stop running because they recognize the lions got what they needed, and they're not going to come after us anymore. Human beings don't do that. We tend to overeat, overconsume, and in the process create havoc and destruction. Even the mukhallafat, the things that we leave behind, the leftovers, they're harmful to the environment. Biggest classic case, and this is something that we should really pay attention to, is plastic. There is a whole area in the Pacific, from the west side of North America. I can't remember the exact size of it. It's quite massive, of just plastic that does not decompose, that is harming the ocean, killing wildlife, and all of these things are going to come on the Day of Judgment and take us into account. Now, all of this is a byproduct of heedlessness. It's because we are in a state of heedlessness. We just go about our lives. We don't really think about the repercussions of anything. And the whole purpose of fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that, O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you just as it has been prescribed upon the people that have come before you. And this is in reference to the people of the book. So that you can gain this taqwa, this mindfulness, this consciousness and awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah follows that up by saying, أَيَّامًا مَعْدُودَاتٍ. It's just for a few specific identified days. And then the rest of the verse after that goes on to say, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ. It just goes on to the excuses. If you were sick, if you were traveling, فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ, so that you have to make it up. Because this is an obligation. This is not a suggestion from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not a thing that you can do just for the sake of your upliftment or some sort of enlightenment that you want to attain, which is the modern language of religion. This is really about you obeying a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during this time. And he calls it ayyaman ma'dudat. So in Arabic, ma'dudat jam'u qillah. So this is like a few days. It's not a lot of days. And if you are unable to fast it for any reason and you have the capacity to make it up, then he tells you when to make it up. And if you are able to fast and you're still breaking it up, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فِدْيَةُ طَعَامِ مَسَاكِينَ فَمَنْ تَطَوَّعَ. So he goes on to all these different options for what you do in case you can't make it up, if you how to feed the orphans or how to feed the needy. Miskin is needy. And whoever volunteers out of their own will, this is better. وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. That if you fast, it's better for you. إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. If you really know the impact of this. And then after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. Why is Ramadan special? Now you should know that Ramadan, prior to Islam, prior to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ramadan was already known by the Arabs. The months of the year were already known by name. And initially the names came about because of certain times of the year. So you have Rabi' al-Awwal, Rabi' al-Thani, or Rabi' al-Akhir. The name came because of spring. That was the time that it correlated with springtime. Dhul Hijjah, so this month was correlated with the season of the Hajj, and they started the year after the Hajj season was over. They started Muharram, which is the sacred month. All these things were kind of known by the Arabs prior to that. Ramadan was known as Ramadan because the Arabic word itself means that which is very hot, very dry. Ramadan, it's very hot ground, because that's the time of the year that Ramadan came about when it was named. It was a hot season. The scholars later on say that another kind of symbolic meaning to this is that if you do Ramadan right, it will burn off all of your sins. If you do Ramadan properly, by the time you finish this month, you should have a clean slate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about Ramadan, He tells us that it's the month that the Quran was revealed in. The Quran was revealed in two stages. The first stage was in totality. It came down into the sama ad-dunya, to the lower heavens, which is what we see, what we experience in this kind of universe. That's where it came down. It came into the world from the Lawh al-Mahfuz, from the sacred tablet, to this world all at once. And then it was revealed in successive duration over time for 20 years to the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, starting with Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. And many of it came down in terms of there was a situation happening, there was a context. A lot of verses came down to address that context and to show you how to actually address these things. And the Quran by itself requires a lecture on its own to just see the significance of what this book is really for, because it's really a guidance for all of our lives. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it that. It's a guidance for people, which is interesting. It's an interesting thing that you see in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala differentiates between nas, which is addressing everyone, and ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, all you who believe. And Allah says that this Quran has guidance for all people. وَبَيِّنَاتٍ مِّنَ الْهُدَى وَالْفُرْقَانِ فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever of you witnesses this month, you are alive and you are well, and you don't have any valid excuses, فَلْيَصُمْهُ. You have to immediately engage in the fast. But if you were traveling, if you were anything else, then you have your excuses, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want difficulty for you. So let's say that you are somebody who has type 2 diabetes and you have to have your sugar controlled in a particular, or type 1 diabetes even, and your sugar needs to be controlled. And if you go into hypoglycemia, this could be dangerous. In fact, if fasting is going to be harmful to you, or if you are pregnant, to your fetus, or if you're breastfeeding, it's going to deprive your child of breast milk. All of these conditions, the scholars tell you, it is not permissible for you to fast, because preserving life actually supersedes that. So you pause, and until you are capable of making up the fast, you break your fast during that time, and there's no harm in that. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us after this verse, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, that if my servants ask you, O Prophet, about me, then Allah answers directly. He doesn't say فَقُلْ إِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, tell them I'm close. Allah answers us directly, and He says that if you ask about me, I'm near. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ دَاعِي إِذَا دَعَانِ, I respond to the call to the one who calls upon me when they call upon me. فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. So they should respond to me and believe in me so that they may be guided. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to talk about fasting. The placement of this verse between Shahru Ramadan and then أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةُ الصِّيَامِ tells you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is close to you at all times, but He's especially close to you during the month of Ramadan, more so than the rest of the year. There is a recognition, the scholars tell us, that the virtue of an action or the evil of an action is magnified depending on the place and the time. So if you're in Mecca or Medina and you pray your prayer, or Aqsa, your prayer is magnified. If you fast in that location, your fasting is magnified in reward. If you commit an evil action in these areas, in these places, your sin is actually also magnified, because it's a sacred site. These are 3 sacred sites, and you have to recognize the sanctity of these sites. Ramadan itself is a sacred time, and we have Ramadan, we have the 10 days of the last of Ramadan, the 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, we have the sacred months themselves. All these times, Ashura, All these times are sacred times, they're blessed times, and the reward for fasting during these times, the reward for charity during these times, the reward for prayer and dhikr during these times is actually magnified. Any good action that you do is magnified a great deal. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is close to you and He responds to you at all times, but there's a special blessed nature to these times that Allah has given them that makes it much more likely for you to get a response much quicker. And we know people that have, people can tell you their experiences. The second that they do it with sincerity, sometimes the call is responded to right away. You'll have people that go to Hajj and they will be sincere in their prayer, and before they leave Mecca even, or Umrah, before they leave Mecca, they see their prayer is being responded to. So that's when these things came about. Now, Surah Al-Baqarah itself, for those, as you know, it was revealed in Medina early after Hijrah. And the first fast before Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ, when he arrived in Medina, he saw the Jews were fasting Ashura, the 10th of Muharram. And he asked them about that. And they said to him that this is the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has saved Musa alayhi salam. And so we fasted in celebration of that. And he sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, "Nahnu haqqu bi Musa." We have more right to Musa alayhi salam than you. So he actually commanded, so there was a faridah based on the sunnah to the companions for that year that they fast Ashura. And he sallallahu alayhi wasallam promised that if later on that if he were to live another year, that he was going to fast the 9th and the 10th, or the 10th and the 11th, but he sallallahu alayhi wasallam passed on before he could do that. And that's why it's based on that we fast 2 days instead of just 1 day in Ashura. Year 2 of the Hijrah is when Ramadan, these verses of obligating fasting were revealed. And it's established in the Sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ fasted 9 Ramadans. Now, fasting was prescribed on previous nations for 3 reasons. And this is something that Ibn Ashur in his tafsir of these verses mentions. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say that it's been prescribed upon you as it's been prescribed upon the nations that have come before you? What is it about fasting that makes it kind of a continuous act that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to stipulate upon people through His messengers? The first reason is that this is a very important act of worship, and that's just indicated by the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to prescribe it. The second one is to minimize the difficulty for those who magnifies difficulty. Many of us hear people talk about, when you talk to non-Muslims about it, they say, oh, not even water. How can you not eat for that long? How are you able to sustain yourself? And they make it seem like such a big deal. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us it's not a big deal. People, before you have done it, you're going to do it. This is just to minimize this kind of big hill that you make, or big mountain out of it that you make in your head. And it's only a few days. And they're specifically outlined, and you'll get through it. Even those today that talk about fasting 18 hours, 19 hours, those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, people look forward to this month, and mashallah, they go through the 19, 20-hour fast, only breaking it for 4 hours. It's only 29 or 30 days anyways. And they experience blessings from this time that those of us in the Southern Hemisphere who get shorter days of fast are just yearning for. So it's not as difficult as people make it. The human body, just as an aside, the human body is much more resilient than it's been made out to be in pop culture. And those of you who are in fitness and who think that you need to have this amount of protein and that amount of carbs, and if you don't have this, then you're going to suffer, struggle, and you need to have this many meals, and you need to eat at this time, and the most important meal of the day is this meal. None of that, all that is nonsense. Human beings have been surviving for a very long time with a natural diet, without having to adhere to these recommendations that, if you look into the background of them, most of them are actually not even research-backed recommendations. For example, the most important meal of the day is breakfast. Says who? What scientific study points out that this was actually the case? In fact, when they studied this, they found out that's not the case. They found out that it's actually beneficial for your body to have at minimum 10 hours, but optimally 12 hours of fasting. You should be not having food for that period of time. It regulates, it allows your body to rest and regulate its hormones. So it's not that big of a deal. And the third reason that Ibn Ashur says is that so that your resolve can kind of be amplified to perform this obligation in a way that supersedes previous nations. And that's the station of the believer. The station of the believer is that when you are given a task that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands of you and tells you that people before you have done it, you vie against, وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسُوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in that you should vie against one another. You see people giving in charity, that should drive something within you, say like, this is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm going to try to top this person. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu was coming to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with half of his wealth, thinking that he's doing a great thing, and he arrives to find Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu having given all of his wealth to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam when they were looking for people to contribute for an effort at the time. So that's for you to vie against one another. The purpose of fasting, I know a lot of people talk about is to feel the hunger of the poor. What you should recognize is fasting is not obligated upon the rich and the well-off. Fasting is an obligation. Fasting in Ramadan is an obligation that's been given to everybody equally. So whether you are poor and destitute or not, you have to fast during the month of Ramadan. Now the scholars do mention that for those of us who are blessed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us an expansion in this life, that reminds us of what it means to be hungry, what it means to actually feel hunger pangs. Now, Imam al-Ghazali in his Ihya actually talks about in his text on breaking the two desires, and when he speaks about the desire of the stomach, he says what most people think of as hunger, that's not really hunger. That's just your nafsani desire for food. True hunger is when you get to a point where if you were given dirt and you would eat it, because that's how hungry you are, that's hunger. Anything less than that, that's just your nafs, that's your ego, that's your lower self desiring things. One way for you to know whether you are, this is an egotistical drive, this is a nafsani drive, versus a true, real desire for food because you're actually deprived and you're in a state of starvation, is if you start to contemplate what you're going to eat. If you think about eating in terms of what should I eat today, and you have options to contemplate, and you're thinking, I would like this or I would like that, that's not hunger. You're in a nafsani state right now. True hunger is, I don't care what you give me, just give it to me. I just want to have something because I'm about to pass out. That's real hunger. So I think we all need to kind of check ourselves a little bit in terms of this when we talk about to feel the hunger of the poor. You're not feeling the hunger of the poor if you're contemplating what option of food you're going to have. You have to get to a state that's beyond that to really talk about the poor and the destitute and poverty. But you're getting a taste of it a little bit still. You're still managing to get, oh man, this is what it feels to be hungry. So that's a benefit of it. But the objective of fasting is to become mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ibn Ashur says that true taqwa, real taqwa, it's in part to seek protection for oneself from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by leaving disobedience. That's really ultimately what taqwa is about. Yeah, it's mindfulness about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of obligations and performing them, but really it's about protecting oneself from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are two types of disobedience that Ibn Ashur highlights. The first one is what can be avoided through tafakkur. So if you just contemplate and think to yourself, this thing is actually a bad thing to do. For example, drinking alcohol or gambling. These things are bad. You can contemplate, you can think about them, you can see the harm versus benefit, you can see that the harm outweighs the benefit. There is really no nafsani, there is no desire, it's not a survival thing. Gambling and drinking and consuming intoxicants, whether it's alcohol or smoking marijuana or whatever, what have you, none of this is driven by a desire to survive. So they're not survival instincts. They're just merely things to fulfill whims. And you can contemplate, you can think about them, and then you can consider and think, this is a bad thing, and I'm not going to engage in it. So you don't necessarily need the Sharia to come in and tell you, this is haram and this is halal. Because you can think about it, and it's not to do with your survival. You will be rewarded for leaving these things if you've been afflicted with them, and you'll be punished if you go and perform them and engage in them. The second type of disobedience, that's the type that stems from a natural drive, this is a natural drive that you want to engage in, and you can't just simply abandon it by contemplation. Example of this is fornication, adultery, zina, engaging in sexual behavior outside of the bounds of marriage between a man and a woman. You can contemplate, you can come to the conclusion that look at what promiscuity results in: broken homes, fatherless children, increased rates of abortion, sexually transmitted infections. I mean, you could just name a whole bunch of things that would make you think like this is a terrible thing and I should not engage in it. But sexual drive is an innate, natural survival instinct, because this is how the species propagates. This is what allows future generations to come into the picture. So what the Sharia comes in and does is, it doesn't tell you it's haram for you to engage in this. It comes in, it regulates it, and it tells you it's halal for you to engage in this within these parameters. You have to go get married. You have to fulfill these conditions of a marriage. And then you can go and fulfill that. And when you go fulfill that, this is what's permissible for you, and this is what's not permissible for you, even with your spouse. For example, you are not allowed to engage in sexual relations, sexual intercourse with your spouse when it's, for the males, when your wife is in her menstrual period. Why is that? Allah tells us in the Quran that this is a harm, this is an adha. Well, we know now medically that the cervix is actually open during the menstrual period so that it can shed the lining. And because it's open, it's not just about, oh, it's gross, it's disgusting. It's actually a conduit for infections. And you can have a really terrible consequences of having sexual intercourse during that period. So Allah says you're not allowed to do that. And the Sharia comes and stipulates these guidelines. So it's kind of like a general rule of thumb that you find disobedience falls into these two categories. And that's what you get from fasting. The Prophet ﷺ says that the fasting, as-sawmu junnah, that fasting is protection. So فَإِذَا صَامَ أَحَدُكُمْ, so if one of you fasts, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ وَلَا يَفْسُقْ, so if you fast, do not start insulting, do not go into evil actions, do not, when you get angry, don't lose your tongue, don't start to curse and do these things. And if someone, فَإِذَا سَابَهُ وَشَاتَمَهُ أَحَدٌ, so if someone insults you, فَلْيَقُلْ اللَّهُمَّ إِنِّي صَائِمٌ, just say, oh Allah, I'm fasting, and abstain from that. So this is what fasting is about. It's about gaining this state of consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way to protect oneself from the punishment of Allah. The virtue of this month is really indicated by the hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is hadith Qudsi, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says on the tongue of his messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that every action, every good action is equivalent to 10 up to 700 compounds. كل حسنة بعشر أمثالها إلى 700 ضعف إلا الصيام فإنه لي وأنا أجزي به. That every action, every good action that you perform, Allah can reward you with 10 folds back, up to 700 folds, except for fasting, for it is for me, and I will reward for it. And Allah does not stipulate an amount. The thing about fasting is, it's the only act of worship in Islam that you cannot confirm. You can watch people pray, you can watch people make wudu, you can watch people do charity, you can show these things off if you want to. You could do all kinds of things. You could put on the hijab, you can, like, whatever it is that you do, you cover your out, everything you do has kind of a social manifestation to it. And riyah can go into it. No matter how pious you think you are, the Prophet ﷺ said that riyah is the most thing that the thing he fears the most for his ummah. Because ostentation, showing off, is more subtle than a black ant rolling on a dark, black, smooth rock in a dark night, moonless night. That's how subtle it can be. So it's very difficult to tell if you have ostentation. You ask Allah, you purify your intentions every time, but then you also come back and you say, maybe something entered into this. Except for fasting. You could tell people you're fasting, but they don't know if you're fasting. You can go back home in the privacy of your own closet even, and just open up a secret cupboard and take out your chocolate and have it in the middle of the daytime, and no one will know except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's interesting about this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that the breath of a person who's in a state of fasting, khaluf al-sa'im, all of us have experienced this. The longer you fast, your breath doesn't smell that nice. And so the scholars, they actually say that this might be for, it's more beloved to Allah than the smell of musk. And they say that this is probably for the akhirah. But one other explanation for this that Ibn Ashur actually mentions this, is that the beautiful thing about fasting, the smell, this repelling smell that would repel people from you in a social setting is actually a symbolic of sometimes you engage in acts of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that socially might put people off. We have all these social stigma with regards to the hijab, to the beard, Muslims doing this or doing that, that socially might put you in awkward positions. Oh, I can't go to this. You're antisocial. Why? Because I don't go to the Christmas party and I don't engage in your drinking and all of that. You might socially be a little bit of an outcast because you're a believer and you have limitations to what you can engage in and can't engage in. But that actually elevates you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that no elevation in this world will be worth it. So there's a beautiful lesson in that. It's just a reminder that sometimes you have to do things where, socially, I'm not in the best kind of situation here, but for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is actually good for me. Now that's just in terms of what Ramadan is about and why we do this and the virtue of this time. Now, there are 3 levels of fasting when you guys engage in fasting Ramadan. The first, and this is based on Imam Mohamed Ghazali's Ihya al-Muddin. He talks about in his book on the secrets of fasting, there are 3 levels of fasting. صوم العموم وصوم الخصوص وصوم الخصوص الخصوص. So as you engage in your fasting, you have to ask yourself, all right, which level am I getting into here? صوم العموم, the general masses kind of fasting, is simply just abstaining from food and drink and cohabitation with your spouse, like engaging in sexual relations with your spouse in the daytime, from sunrise to sunset. Sunrise, what we mean by sunrise, we mean the break of dawn, not actual sunrise, but the break of dawn, which is about an hour to an hour and a half before sunrise. So from the break of dawn until sunset, you don't do these things. That is the base level of fasting. And so when you go look into the fiqh of fasting, so for the converts and those who haven't studied, the fiqh of fasting is pretty simple. Make sure that your intention is made before the break of dawn, that you're going to fast the next day. Depending on the school that you follow, I mean, the Malikis, it's enough to do one intention at the beginning of the month. So the last night of Sha'ban, when you know that the new crescent has been sighted, and tomorrow, let's say, is going to start Ramadan, you can just make that intention once for the whole month, and that's sufficient for you to have your intention done. For the Shafi'is, I believe you have to renew your intention every night. So depending on the school that you follow, that's a matter of difference there. For the Malikis, if you happen to have needed to break your fast for any reason, so let's say that you got really sick, la qaddar Allah, may Allah protect us all, or for women, you happen to have your menstrual cycle in the middle of the month, and so you have to break your fast. When you restart fasting, you have to renew your intention because your fasting was broken, your ibadah was broken that way. Just as an aside for the sisters, this question comes up. I posted a thing on Instagram about it on my page. There are some sisters who would like to go and take birth control pills because they want to stop their menstrual cycles during the month so they can fast the whole month. Part of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to not do something sometimes. There's a reason why Allah gives us in the Sharia all these kind of guidelines. And for women, it's recognized. You have these menstrual cycles. During that time, there are rulings for that, and there's a way to make it up. And you actually gain rewards for performing, for breaking these things. I mean, if you're traveling in the Maliki school, if you're traveling longer than 4 days or longer for the distance prescribed for a permissible travel, you shorten your prayer. If you happen to be with people who are residents of a city that you travel to, and you are less than 4 days there, and you need to shorten your prayer, and they're praying a full, let's say the dhuhr 4 rak'ah, you pray with them in jama'ah 4 rak'ah, and then it's actually encouraged, it's sunnah for you after you pray dhuhr 4 rak'ah with them to pray dhuhr 2 rak'ah as a shortened prayer, because that will actually be fulfilling the sunnah of shortening the prayer in travel. So for the sisters who have their menstrual period, don't go taking, if you take hormone replacement of any kind, you need to know that there are side effects to this that could sometimes be dire. You could put you at risk for strokes, for example. So there's no need for you to put yourself in harm's way unnecessarily when the Sharia is samha. It's a beautiful, gentle, merciful Sharia. and Allah tells you, hey, you're in the state of menstruation, don't fast. Break your fast for that period. When you come back, renew your intention and then begin. You have to have full intellect as well. So you have to be aqil, if you are, and you have to be past puberty. So it's actually discouraged for children, especially in places where you have really long fasts, to subject them to fasting. You can train them a little bit, have them fast for a few hours and reward them after, but don't get them into fasting. They're still in a state of growth and development, and it actually can lead, especially for the longer fasts, those in the northern hemisphere, it's harmful for the child. So if your kid has not passed puberty, there's no need for them to fast. You encourage them to pray, because that is a daily thing, and so it's good to get them to practice that from a young age. But fasting is something that happens once a year, and it's fine if you need to wait until they reach their puberty. And these are just the general rules for fasting. It's pretty simple. And during the day, just make sure that you abstain from drinks, abstain from water, abstain from food, any type of food. And if you happen to accidentally vomit, that doesn't break your fast. If you accidentally broke your fast in the Maliki school, that actually breaks your fast. I believe in the Shafi'is it doesn't. You could just say "At'amani Allah wa sakhani." That's based on the hadith. But according to the action of the people of Medina, if you broke your fast by accident, you happen to consume water or something, that breaks your fast. But that doesn't mean you get to continue to eat and drink afterwards. You have to actually stop completely for the rest of the day. That day is invalidated, and you have to make it up later. The difference is, because it was an accident, you don't have to pay expiation. So that's just the general kind of borderline. This is baseline, Sawmul Umum. This is general people fasting. Sawmul Khusus, which is kind of the special people's fast now. And that's what he calls Sawmul Salihin. This is the righteous people's fast. This fast is fulfilled by adding to this baseline of just legal aspect of fasting. Now you have to fast your limbs from committing transgressions. And the limbs here, in Arabic, it refers to not just the hands and the feet and the eyes and the hearing, and it also refers to the tongue. And this can be accomplished and realized through 6 things, as Imam al-Ghazali mentions. First of all, you have to preserve your eyesight from just expanding it and to looking into everything and to whatever. You have to remember hadith. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. From the beautiful Islam of a person is to leave that which does not concern them. There is no better way for us to practice this beautiful hadith, no better time than to do it in Ramadan. And the way that you do that is to ask yourself something that I continuously bring up for people. What is within your circle of concern versus what is within your circle of influence versus what is outside of both of these circles? So what can you actually impact? What can you do something about versus what is something that you might have concern about but you can't really do anything about beyond maybe just doing a dua, which is a powerful thing in itself, versus you can't do anything about this and this actually has no concern to you. Each one of us individually knows these things, but I can tell you that the majority of what we subject ourselves to in social media is outside of our circles of influence and circle of concern as well. So this is a time for us to not expand our eyesight, our gaze into everything and anything. It's time for us to be a bit more watchful over what we look at. Preserve the tongue. Do not engage in backbiting, gossiping, lying, misdirections, things like that. And that's actually most of what we get into with our speech. If you really reflect and started to write down, and this is a thing I would recommend you guys do, just write down all of your statements throughout the day. Just carry a journal with you, or if you have your smartphone with you, just take your notes app and just write down everything you've said, or record, better yet. Record every time you go to say anything, just record it. And then play it to yourself later and evaluate yourself. Sayyidina Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu said, "Hasibu qabla an tuhasabu." Take yourselves into account before you're taken into account. So preserving the tongue, preserving the hearing, not listening to things. If you're not permitted to engage in backbiting and gossiping, that also means you can't listen to it. Preserving the limbs and the stomach from ambiguous things, shubuhat. So when it comes to food, you can't, in prayer, for example, what do? We go and make wudu, but we are wasteful with the water. We just let that tap run through so heavy. And in a sense, we're actually beginning an act of obedience to Allah, prayer, by preceding it with an act of disobedience. We're trying to engage in wudu, which is an act of obedience, by disobeying Allah, by wasting water. Same thing with fasting. You can't just fast all day. You've been so good all day, and then at the end of the day, you come in and you just bought, I don't know, Kentucky Fried Chicken, or you bought chicken from the supermarket that you don't even know if it's halal or not. So you have to avoid shubuhat, avoid things that are going to be ambiguous. You can't break your fast with things that are impermissible. That includes also the money that you earn. Look at the income that you've earned. Did you actually earn that through halal means, through permissible means? If it is through permissible means, did you really actually do the tasks that were required of you? Or are you just earning the money without doing anything for it? And people are paying you expecting a service, but you didn't actually provide that service. Do not allow free reign over permissible food when breaking fast. That's the fifth thing. So Ramadan is a time when you get invited for iftars and you get invited for community things or whatnot. You really have to be diligent with yourself. I'd recommend, personally, I think I might go once, if at all. I think last Ramadan I did not go to a single invitation for iftar. The Ramadan before that I went to one at my cousin's house. But yeah, I don't go to, it's a practice of mine personally, because I know that once you go to people's house, iftar is a feast, and that negates the whole purpose. Imam al-Ghazali says that when you have, he says that during Ramadan, people bring out even foods that they never even bring out the rest of the year, and they create this abundance, and it just goes into excess and everything. So don't do that. In Ramadan, don't try to make up the meals that you missed throughout the day in the evening at iftar. Your iftar should be the amount. You can have, let's say that you have a special kind of food for Ramadan because you want to kind of give it a special kind of time, and especially for kids, you want to give them the impression and the feeling that this is a special time of the year, which is a good thing to do. But the amount that you serve, make sure that the amount is not more than what your regular meal would be, which should not be much. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, مَا مَلَأَ ابْنُ آدَمَ وِعَاءً شَرًّا مِنْ بَطْنِهِ, that the son of Adam or the daughter of Adam did not fill a vessel that is more evil than their stomach. حَسْبُ ابْنُ آدَمَ لُقَيْمَاتٍ يُقِمْنَ صُلْبَهُ, that it is sufficient for the son or the daughter of Adam to have few morsels of food to keep your back straight. فَإِنْ كَانَ لَا بُدَّ, but if you are a gluttonous person who cannot control yourself, فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفَسِهِ أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. That if you're a gluttonous person, people think the sunnah is to eat third and third and third. That's not the sunnah. That is the permission, that is the license that the Prophet ﷺ gives to those of us who are having trouble controlling ourselves. And he says a third and a third and a third. So you have to watch yourself when you're breaking your fast. Have just sufficient amount for the sake of keeping your back straight. And that will elevate you to the station of fasting of the righteous people. And the sixth condition to fulfill this, all of this together, is to, by the end of it, after you break your fast, you are in a state between hope and fear. You're hoping that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts your fast, and you are also concerned that maybe it wasn't sincere enough, maybe that you didn't do it right, that maybe Allah will not accept it from you. So you're hoping that Allah will accept it, but also you're concerned that it may not be accepted. That's the station of the believer. Fasting of the special ones amongst the special ones, so the third highest level of fast. Let's say that you are someone who's been doing all of these things for a few years. What's your next step that you need to up your game, to elevate? He says is to abstain the heart from lowly aspirations and worldly desires. And the Salihin and the Awliya say that you can break your fast in Ramadan by simply contemplating about where you're going to get your income, or thinking about your work, or thinking about that during the day. But that's like an upper level. I should just clarify something here. Breaking the fast from a legal perspective can happen with just eating and drinking. If you go and you engage in a questionable, let's say that you gossiped a little bit. You didn't intend to, but you gossiped, you caught yourself. Does that break your fast? Legally, it does not break your fast. You ask Allah to forgive you, and you step back, and you just and you abstain from that. But he sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us that in a hadith that many people, they get nothing from their prayer except sahar, just staying up late, because it has not transformed their behavior. Many people fast, but they get nothing from their fasting except hunger and thirst, because their day is not any different. You should, when you begin Ramadan, your day should be qualitatively different. Your conduct should be different over the next 29 to 30 days, and you should be watching yourself so that you are in your best behavior. And the idea behind this is Ramadan is a school. By the time you finish, that should also take on your life. And inshallah, as we go now into the tips of Ramadan and beyond, this is how you can now start to apply some practices. There are practices that you'll do just for Ramadan, and then there are practices that you will start to do this Ramadan with the intention of going beyond Ramadan. Because by the time you finish Ramadan, you should not regress back to the same person that you were when Ramadan started. So the date today is May 3rd for some of you, May 4th for the rest of us in the Southern Hemisphere in Australia. Ramadan is scheduled to start, I think, May 6th or 7th, depending on where you are and which community you're in. You should not be the same on June 6th or 7th on Eid time as you are on May 6th or 7th when Ramadan starts. Should be a different person, even if it's just a little bit. Now, just a little bit of practical things about Ramadan and beyond. First of all, there's no action that is accepted in the Sharia that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts without a proper intention. Imam al-Bukhari in his collection starts off by talking about the hadith, citing the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. That actions are by intentions, and every person will be rewarded in accordance to the intention that they make. So make sure that you actually begin the month with a contemplative, almost meditative. You know, all these modern calls for meditation and headspace apps and all of that. Actually do that as a believer. We should take a second and just, confirm your intention that you're doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're going to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this fast at the end of it and to facilitate for you all the actions that will be beloved to Him that will make this an acceptable fast for Him. So make sure that you purify and clarify your intentions before the month begins. Now recognize that Ramadan is specific in that it has two elements to it, two kind of prongs to Ramadan, which is related to the acts of worship. Acts of worship can be considered muta'addi or ghayr muta'addi. A way to translate that will be, I don't want to say transgressive, maybe transductive, transductive. It transduces to others versus ones that are restrictive to oneself. So an act of prayer, for example, when you pray, the ritual prayer, qiyamul layl, that's restrictive. That's something that benefits you and you alone. Transducive acts of worship, that's like charity, for example, service, volunteering. These are things that now benefit the rest of the community. And the Prophet ﷺ tells us that أَحَبُّ النَّاسِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ, that the most beloved of all people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who brings the most benefit to people. So you have to look at your Ramadan actions and activities in terms of the personal and the public. What can you do to benefit yourself and to transform oneself? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, لَا يُغَيِّرُ اللَّهُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Because that's really the purpose of Ramadan, is to transform oneself, because from that, then the whole society will transform. All this activism, all this political work that people do, all of the social justice actions that people engage in, all of that is really not going to get anywhere if you are still in the same condition that you're in. You have to transform yourself before society is transformed. It would be considered an act of unwisdom, or it's unwise to think, and it's also delusion to think that you can change everything out there while you remain the same yourself. There are a number of articles people write about, for example, in the United States, they have Trump now. Well, what is Trump? Trump is really just a reflection, a manifestation of the way American society is. That's how it's become, and so that's the leader. وَكَذَلِكَ نُوَلِّي بَعْضَ الظَّالِمِينَ بَعْضًا بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that like so we put oppressors over other oppressors based on what they've been earning. This is what you've done to yourself, so that's what you get. There's a hadith that, although it's weak, but it's supported by this verse. The Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, كَيْفَمَا كُنْتُمْ يُوَلَّى عَلَيْكُمْ. As you are, you will have people put over you. So Ramadan is about transforming yourself and then you transform the rest of society. That doesn't mean that you do nothing in your activism and good works. You do that, but you have to remember, all of that will be in vain if you don't change yourself. So at the personal level, there are some things to engage in, to actualize or to realize the spirituality of the month, to really give your ruh, your soul, the food that it needs. There's a beautiful quote by Habib Umar, where he says that prepare for the first night of Ramadan, for on this night Allah gazes at his creation, a special gaze which is unique to his ummah. Allah will never punish the one to whom Allah gazes upon. So you really have to take a moment. That last night of Sha'ban, when you find out that Ramadan has entered, when they announce it, at Maghrib times, like the new crescent has been sighted, you should have I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about anticipating that moment to come. So that's what you have to do. And just as an aside, don't engage in arguments or debates, because that's a good way to kill your spirit of Ramadan, about do you start with the calculations or do you start with the moon sighting. This is a debate that is ongoing, that is not going to finish. And so it's best for you to just do what you're comfortable with and don't engage in debates with people. My personal position on this, and take it for what it's worth, you gotta do the moon sighting. All acts of worship in Islam are linked with natural phenomena. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed them and linked them together with, the prayer is linked with the movement of the sun in the sky and the shadow on the ground, how it lengthens and how it shortens. And he tells us that in the Quran. Allah tells us, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. They ask you about the moon phases. Tell them they are for people to establish their sacred times. And there's a sunnah that when the new crescent is born, and look at the way that wiladatul al-hilal, it's a birth of the new crescent. And out of the birth of the new crescent, there is actually a dua that you make. So when you go inside it, you actually make a dua. Allahumma ahillahu alayna bil yumn wal iman wal sin wal islam. Rabbi wa rabbuk Allah. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam used to speak to the crescent, speak to the moon directly. So when you just rely on calculations, you're depriving yourself from that. And you're relying on kind of man-made constructs and concoctions and technological things that this is not something new. These calculations have been known for a very long time. It's not the modern era with technology that made us realize these things. For a very long time, people don't have that. But the thing about technology, and we talked about this in Endo's book club in Technopoly by Neil Postman, technology asserts a new moral code. It changes our perspective and it makes us rethink about how we should engage in doing things. And you should look at the Benedictine monks section in Neil Postman's Technopoly to see how that changed the way that they conducted the prayer and the relationship between the church and the state and business, which is a really, I don't know, for me it's a concerning thing. But regardless, if you go with the calculations, don't argue about it. Just, this is what you do, fine, khair. Just do it. The first night, prepare yourself. The whole purpose of this month is to cultivate taqwa and begin by abstaining your tongue from debates and argumentations about the religion. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told us that إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْمِرَاءُ فِي الدِّينِ. He warned us, beware of argumentation in the religion, فَإِنَّمَا هَلَكَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ بِالْمِرَاءِ فِي الدِّينِ أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم, that the people who have come before you got destroyed by argumentation in the religion. Now, the spiritual connection gained from being close to Allah, this is the more that you strive to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more connection that you'll have. That's what you're trying to get. This is a relationship between you and Allah, and it starts with this private act of worship. No one knows that you're fasting other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you really have to embody that in your mind. You really have to really consider that and realize it and really take it on. And the closer you get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more that you follow in the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the closer you'll actually be. If Allah, as Allah tells us as we're told in the hadith, when Allah loves a servant, He tells Jibreel alayhi salam that He loves the servant and commands Jibreel to love that person. And then Jibreel descends into the heavens and tells the inhabitants of the heavens, love this person because Allah loves this person. And then qabul, acceptance, will be laid on for you on the earth. So you really have to, this is about your relationship with Allah. And it really begins with something important. Many of us know about Ramadan, أوله رحمة وأوسطه مغفرة وآخره عتق من النار. That the beginning of Ramadan is mercy, the middle of it is forgiveness, and the end of it is protection from the hellfire. The beginning of it is mercy. The beginning of it is rahmah, which comes from the word rahim, which shares the same meaning for womb. If you have a womb, you want to expand the womb to accommodate a growing fetus. So when you come to Ramadan, you have to come in with the attitude of, this is a time of expansion. Don't overburden yourself. The Prophet ﷺ said, أَوْغِلُوا فِي هَذَا الدِّينِ بِرِفْقٍ. Delve into this religion gently. There are a lot of expectations that many of us place on ourselves that may be unrealistic. I mean, I could tell you personal experience. I actually have the end of a semester coming up during Ramadan. We have clinical exams. We have 3 written exams. One of them is a short answer exam. It's a stressful time for me. So what do? Normally I have a level of practice that I dedicate in Ramadan, and alhamdulillah, I managed to get it done. This year, I'm actually making adjustments. And one of the things that the nafs can come at you with, the ego can come at you with, is it can make you feel bad for not engaging in more things. But you got to remember that for those of you who are studying, who have exams, the dhikr of a student is study. The dhikr of a student is to finish their obligations first and then engage in these things. So let's say that you're someone who's used to, for example, finishing a whole khatam. You finish the whole Quran in the month and you pray every tarawih. But now you have these obligations and you're going to struggle. You might actually fail out. You may not be able to complete things properly. Whatever the case is, you have to make some adjustments. There is no requirement upon you to finish the whole Quran during this month. What you should do is take it easy on yourself and just reflect and make a plan. Write it out. There's a regularity and a routine to our lives. Nobody lives completely unpredictably every single day where you can't just sit down and tell me, this is what I do. I wake up at this time normally. This is when I go to work or to school. This is my schedule. This is my calendar. This is what it looks like. All of us are able to sit down, just have half an hour, reflect on your day, plot it out, and then actually take out blocks of time where you know that you can dedicate 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever the case may be. And each of us, you know yourself. Don't ever try to go and compare yourself with anybody else. On the day of judgment, Allah is not going to compare you with anybody else. He's going to ask you in accordance with your own state, based on your own context, your own experiences. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah does not burden a soul with more than it can bear. So whatever challenges that you've had is because you specifically, Allah created you to be able to handle those challenges, and someone else may not have been. So Allah is not going to compare you with, He's not going to look at, for example, Aisha. He's not going to look like, Aisha, see what Juwariya was doing? Like, how come you didn't get to do that? Juwariya was doing all these things. Or the opposite way around. Juwariya, do you see what Aisha was doing? And how come you missed out on this? Allah's not going to do this with you, so don't do that to yourself. This is between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you know yourself best. So you know what your level of practice is right now. Sit down, plot out your calendar, and you really have to set these goals for yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to achieve anything. You look at anybody that has succeeded in anything in this world deliberately, they've all sat down, and I'm talking big success. I'm not talking about fluke kind of accidental things. The norm is that if you're going to be successful, you have to have a plan to succeed. So to be successful in Ramadan, you have to sit down and plan that out. So first of all, you have to remind yourself that you have to be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of your actions. The Prophet ﷺ said, تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَاهُ أَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِحْسَانِ. Tell me about excellence. Jibreel alayhi salam, when he asked him, he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that to worship Allah as if you see him. فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ. That if you don't see him, know that he sees you. How do you boost that? You have to know about the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A lot of us have not studied. I mean, there are some available online now, some videos, some recordings that people have done. There are books on this, the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have to know the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what they mean and how they manifest. The whole world is confusing to people who are not believers, which is really a marvelous thing to witness. But if you know the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything makes sense. And if you know how they manifest, you're never surprised. He was like, that's the name Al-Qabid, that's the name Al-Basit, that's the name Al-Latif being manifested here, that's Al-Khaliq, and that's Al-Bari, and that's Al-Musawwir, and that's Al-Rahman, and that's Al-Rahim, and that's Al-Ghafur. All of these names, that's Al-Jabbar, that's Al-Aziz being manifested over here. When you know the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases, and that's when you get taqwa. I know a lot of us hear about like have taqwa, but you wonder like, how do I have taqwa? This is how you get taqwa. You have to know your maker. So you have to know the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what they mean. You have to constantly be engaged in seeking forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who was infallible, he was seeking forgiveness from Allah 100 times or more every day. So sit down and do your istighfar 100 times or more every day. This should be part of your daily routine. Have your misbahah, if you can, your prayer beads. It's 100 times. It's not going to take you to a couple minutes. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, and do it with awareness. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh, astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh, with reflection on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgiving you every time you seek forgiveness. So you have to learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Learn the aqidah. If you have not studied aqidah, I highly encourage you guys. You got to learn your aqidah. And I'm not talking about like high level theology here, just a basic thing. I put out a series, Aqidatul Najat, the Creed of Deliverance. You can find it on SoundCloud, YouTube. It's available for you guys if you want to listen to that. But learn your aqidah. Get to know your aqidah. Know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Know the attributes of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Know your Prophet. This is how you can start to really transform your being. Secondly, you have to engage in gratitude. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ وَلَئِن كَفَرْتُمْ إِنَّ عَذَابِي لَشَدِيدٌ. If you are thankful, I will increase you. But if you are denying, if you're rejecting my blessings upon you, my punishment is grave, is severe. You have to, when you get up in the morning, you should engage in saying, Alhamdulillah alladhi ahyana ba'dama amatana wa ilayhi nushur. You have to say, Alhamdulillah, you got up. You had another opportunity to get up in the morning. So thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you have to thank Allah for every single thing. If you want Allah to increase you in any possible way in the things that you're engaging in, you have to thank Him for what you have. You have to show gratitude for what you've been given. Otherwise, why would Allah give you more things to be ingrateful about? If you're an ingrate, Allah's not going to increase you. If you're finding constriction in your life, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what you've been given already. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells us that من بات في داره آمنا قوت يومه آمنا في سربه ضامنا قوت يومه معافا في بدنه فكأنما حيزت له الدنيا. Whoever gets up, whoever is during their day, they're safe in their home, they have their food, their sustenance guaranteed for them that day. Like you can open up your fridge and you can see that, mashallah, I have food for the day, and you are healthy. That's like you've been given the whole entire world, because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. You're not guaranteed the next breath. So for you to have all these things, you have to be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You thank Allah for all of your food. You thank Allah for all your health. You thank Allah for the water that you're able to drink, for the ability to walk, for the ability to stand up, for the ability to breathe. There are a lot of people that are suffering in the world today, and you see them. That's why one of the du'as that you make when you see someone who's struggling in some sort of way, Alhamdulillah alladhi afani mimma ibtalaka bih wa faddalani ala kathirin min khalqih. Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has safeguarded me from what He has given you in tribulation and has preferred me with His blessings. So you have to be thankful if you want to become more conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to just recognize your utter weakness. You did not have anything to do with gaining the things that you've got. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them to you. So to develop gratitude, you have to have this inward recognition of the blessing. You have to have outward recognition and gratitude for the blessings. You have to have a good piece of advice that I've been given, and I'll relate to you, is get a small journal and just write, like those 5-minute journals. Write things that you're grateful for. That, like, every day, pick something different. Or pick the things that just really you marvel at every day. Like, subhanAllah, I'm able to stand up and not fall. That's an amazing thing. I mean, in the clinic today, I go and not a day passes without seeing somebody with orthostatic hypotension. They're sitting down, they're fine, they get up, they get woozy, and they fall down. Their heart, their blood pressure can't keep up to allow them to stand up. So, mashallah, alhamdulillah, I'm able to stand up and just be upright. That's an amazing thing. So write 5 things in a journal every day that you're grateful for. And be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alhamdulillah for all these things that have been given. And ask Allah for permission and for help for everything. Is'alullah kulla shay. Ask Allah for everything. Some of the Sahaba, some of the Tabi'een, some of the awliya, they would ask Allah for a thread. You know, like your button from your shirt fell and you're looking for a thread and a needle. They would ask, oh Allah, please grant me some thread and needle so that I can do this. Even though they know they have it, but they're asking Allah, like, can I just go and have the power? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There's no transformation and no power except through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have to ask Allah for everything. Oh Allah, I want some shoes. I'm just going to put on some shoes. Allah, grant me the shoes so that I can put them on so that I can walk out. Oh Allah, grant me some food. Oh Allah, grant me this. Even if you know that it's in the fridge, ask Allah for every little thing. And when it comes to acts of worship, really, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma ij'al al-Qur'an al-Karima rabi'a sudurina wa nura qulubina. Oh Allah, make the Qur'an the garden of our hearts and the light of our chests. Allah, please grant me the opportunity to recite your Qur'an ana al-layli wa atraf al-nahar, at the beginning of the daytime and during the nighttime. If you're wondering why you're having trouble engaging in acts of worship, wonder no more. Ask Allah and know that the second you engage in asking Allah for something, it's because Allah has inspired you or facilitated for you the means to ask Him so that He can grant it to you, because He already wants to grant you these things. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, I want to pray at night. I really want to pray at night. Allah, please wake me up at night and allow me to overcome myself and grant me the opportunity to stand in front of you. Grant me the opportunity to recite Quran. Ask Allah for these things. Don't take on. We burden ourselves with things that we haven't been asked to burden ourselves with. So just ask Allah and Allah will grant you these opportunities. But for you to be granted these opportunities, you really have to begin Ramadan with a sincere repentance. Tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tawbah ya Rabbi. Oh Allah, I ask you for repentance. I regret everything that I transgressed. I don't want to go back to that. I promise to never go back to that. I ask you to facilitate it for me, that I never go back to these things. And then you start to focus on what are the things in your daily life that facilitate transgressions and remove them. So if you happen to have a problem with looking at impermissible things, well, remove the things that allow you to look at impermissible things. Don't take, if you're going down a particular road and there are posters and billboards of things that you shouldn't be looking at, maybe you need to change your route. Even if it takes you an additional 5 minutes, but to go through another road that doesn't have these things and it's still, safe for you to go through, that's better for you. If you have a bad company, the Prophet ﷺ said that the person is going to be upon the religion or upon the way of the people that they're most closely intertwined with. So look into who you're intertwined with. Look at your friends. Look at your circles. If they are not facilitating a proper relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you should have no problem whatsoever. And I'm talking about, you can have an emotional problem, but no problem just for the sake of Allah cutting those relationships off. People that are not good for you, they're not good for you. So find righteous people. Find good suhbah, a good righteous companionship. People that will facilitate your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that will get you closer to Allah, that will make you, and you'll see that in the way that they interact with people. And one of the signs that once you find people that are always argumentative, people who are always sowing hate and discord, this is a person that's far away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if that's the type of individual. And I don't care whether they have full-on donned hijab, niqab, beards, the combination, whatever it is. If there are people of discord, people of argumentation, people of just calling to the ego, people who like to sow problems between people who like to divide and sectarianism and things like that, these are the people you need to get away from. That's not religion. Rahmah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The very first thing you recite in the Quran is in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. It's expansive. It accommodates as much as possible. It finds excuses for people to be within the fold. So that's who you should surround yourself with. And to facilitate your tawbah, for forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, also forgive people who have wronged you. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will return, هَلْ جَزَاءُ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَّا الْإِحْسَانِ. In Surah Ar-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, isn't the reward for good anything other than good? So you need to forgive people and Allah will forgive you in return. People who have transgressed against you personally, make it a point to say, you know what, I'm going to let that go. I don't need retribution. I don't need justice. All that is all bygone, not even in the next world. I actually give them my back, let them have it, it's fine. I don't want anything. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your transgressions, because we each transgress the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When people transgress against you, Allah will forgive you, your transgressions against His limits when you forgive people that have transgressed against you. And more importantly, don't have any animosity in your heart towards anybody, even those who have wronged you. That doesn't mean that when you forgive that it was right, that you accept it, that it was okay for them to do what they did to you. None of that is true. It's not okay, it's wrong. We acknowledge all of these things, but let it go. Don't hold that in your heart. And the way that you feel it is when they're mentioned, you feel constriction. And what you should do in order for you to remove that constriction from your heart against that individual, because you got to remember, they're still, no matter how bad a person is, they're still a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if they're still alive, there is hope. So there's nothing worse than a people attacking and trying to kill their own prophet. That's what Quraysh was doing, trying to do with the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But what did he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam do? He's our example. Allahumma ighfir liqawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. Oh Allah, forgive my people for they don't know. So someone is alive, they wronged you in some way. You don't have to maintain a relationship with the person. If they're bad for you, you don't have to do that. You don't have to say that it's okay and just be okay with it. What I'm saying is that forgiveness is to let go and pray for them. Oh Allah, please guide this person, improve their state, ward off any evil that they might do from people. Let them not engage in this anymore. Pray for them with sincerity. Sincerely pray for them. And nobody's beyond the pale. As long as you have a breath within you, because if you're going to say other people are beyond the pale, then maybe you're beyond the pale. Qunut is forbidden. Despair from Allah's mercy is forbidden. So as long as someone is alive, pray for them. Tawakkul. So this is like a positive mindset, optimism in and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is tawakkul? Tawakkul is reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You recognize that, look, I'm going to engage in this thing. I'm going to do all the work that is necessary for it, but I know that the ends are not within my control. It's upon you to strive, but it's not upon you to arrive. So you strive, and you're going after something that you think is good for you, and you believe is good for you. But let's say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala redirects you and actually prevents you from getting to the thing that you were going after. You have to believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to waste your energy. And if you're with Allah all day and you're asking Him to take you to what is good for you in this world and in the next, that energy that you exerted in striving for the thing you thought was good for you, Allah will take that energy and will direct it, will give you the result that is good for you. I have my own examples of that. If you reflect on your own life, you'll have your own examples of that. Things you were going after, things that you thought were going to benefit you, and Allah has prevented you from getting them, and then you were exchanged with something that was even better for you. Patience. You have to start, so the scholars tell us that Imam al-Ghazali actually starts off with what is special about Ramadan. Ramadan is a quarter of patience. And the reason for that is because the Prophet ﷺ, there's two hadiths. One of them, he says that fasting is half of patience, and patience is half of iman. So fasting is a quarter of iman, quarter of belief, a quarter of faith. So you have to exercise your patience. And patience is not something that you just passively sit back and it's like, I'm just being patient. If you are afflicted with any problem, with any tribulation, patience is to engage in all the necessary actions, all the means that you can take to remove this tribulation while relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time being in a state of rida, in a state of content, acceptance, and gratitude for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put you in and has given you. That you recognize that had it not been for the thing that you have right now, you wouldn't be talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as you are talking to Him right now. Some people are afflicted with difficulties and they're just always in dua. It's like, and sometimes I get these questions. I'm always asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I still haven't had this thing lifted from me. You have to remember that you just said, I'm always talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a huge thing. A lot of people out there are in heedlessness. They're not always talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the worst state to be in. And you, despite the tribulation, the difficulty, which if you look at the grand scheme of things, how long is it going to last? You know, average age now, people live is 80 years old, 83, something like that. So you're going to live, let's say that you live 83 and you had a tribulation for 83 years. What is that in relation to eternity? And people don't have tribulations usually for 83 years. It's usually a few years and then it passes. You were living a good life before, you had a difficulty, and then we make a thing out of it and we start to freak out. And then we talk to Allah. Well, maybe Allah is telling you, I need to talk to you for a bit. And you're always talking to Allah. That's not to say that you should want tribulation. We ask Allah for His lutf and afiyah. We ask Allah for His gentle, subtle kind of interventions to ward off any harm from us. And anybody that's got tribulation, may Allah alleviate it from you and give you relief and to allow you to go back into a state of expansion. But وَلَئِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are thankful and grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the expansions that you have in your life, because no matter how much of a constriction you're feeling right now, there are areas in your life where you've been having expansions and you're just not focusing on them. So you have to focus on the areas of expansion and thank Allah, alhamdulillah, that I have all this bust in my life. This qabd, this constriction will eventually be removed. So patience is to, I have a state of constriction. All right, I need to go do some things about it. And as you go and exercise your efforts to remove this state of constriction, you're still in a state of gratitude and acceptance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's true patience. And you're always thinking of Allah as you do this. And you're pushing. You're always pushing for these things. You're pushing to remove this. Pushing to remove constriction is not a sign of ingratitude. Pushing to remove constriction is just taking on the means, which is what you're supposed to do. Tie your camel and then rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as you do all of this, you're doing it with ihsan. You're remembering, they just built this amazing marvel, this architectural marvel in Istanbul, the largest mosque, I think, in Europe now. There's definitely the largest one in Turkey. It just opened and it holds up to 63,000 worshippers. You guys should see the video for Subh prayer. There was like 60,000 people praying Fajr in this mosque. And Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi said the relief of this ummah is going to come when the people attending Fajr is going to be the same number as the people attending Jum'ah. That should tell you something. So that's ihsan. That's doing everything with excellence. Inna Allah yuhibbu idha amila ahadukum amalan an yutqinahu. Allah loves that when you engage in an action that you perfect it to the best degree possible. I'm just going to finish off because we've gone on a little bit longer than this was intended for, with some acts of worship to help boost your spiritual connection. Read Bidayatul Hidayah if you can, the beginning of guidance by Imam al-Ghazali. You might find somebody who has done a short commentary on it online somewhere. But every act of worship that you do has kind of the spiritual significance and the material significance of it. So for example, when you engage in wudu, yeah, you're washing and you're cleaning yourself, but at the same time, when you wash your hands, any sinful action that your hands engage in, the sins are falling off of that. So metaphysically speaking, the water that you use to wash with actually becomes impure because it now has najasa in it. It's all the sins that you've performed. Your face, anything that you've gazed upon that you shouldn't have gazed upon, you wash your face from it, the sins actually fall from that. So as you engage in your wudu, try to reflect on the actual metaphysical significance of all of these acts that you do. And try to focus as much, take your focus and period in stride. Give yourself short goals. All right, I'm going to focus as much as possible. And when you get out of focus, you come back, you bring yourself back to it. I highly recommend, if you can, there's this app there. It has some free kind of meditation exercises, Headspace. The good thing about it is if you do the 5-minute ones, it teaches you how to basically capture a wandering mind. And a lot of people that have their minds wander during prayer, when you do these exercises, these meditation exercises, and learn how to capture your wandering mind and refocus it back into what it needs to focus on, it actually has a direct impact on your prayer itself. And you'll start to find that your prayer, you're starting to focus even better. Seeking Laylatul Qadr on the last 10 nights. Make sure that Laylatul Qadr is the night of the divine decree. That is the night in which the Quran was descended in its totality to the Sama' ad-Dunya, to the lower heavens. The Prophet ﷺ said it's in the last odd evenings, the last odd nights, last odd nights of the last 10 nights of Ramadan. But given that some people start Ramadan on a Monday and the others start on a Tuesday, which one is really the odd night? So I would just say all 10 nights. Get up for tahajjud for the whole month, but try to give extra emphasis on the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Try not to rush your prayer. You don't have to recite lengthy surahs. It's better for you to recite short chapters from the Quran in your prayer with full focus than to try to rush through and be wandering all over the place in a long prayer. So 5 minutes in prayer with focus is better than 10 minutes with a scattered mind. And don't rush after you finish your prayer. A lot of people, after we finish prayer, you just want to get up and go. Stay, do your adhkar. One dua that I would recommend you make at the end of after your prayer, this is something that the Prophet ﷺ used to say after every prayer. Allahumma inni as'aluka at-tathbita fil umur wa 'azimat ar-rushd wa as'aluka shukra ni'matika wa husna 'ibadatika wa as'aluka qalban saliman wa lisanan sadiqan wa khuluqan mustaqima wa astaghfiruka lima ta'lam wa as'aluka min khayri ma ta'lam wa a'udhu bika min sharri ma ta'lam innaka anta 'allamul ghuyub. Inshallah, I will put this in the comment section and I'll write it out for those of you who didn't pick that up. But that's at the beginning of the dua for those who can do the Arabic. When you search it online, if you want to search it online, Allahumma inni as'aluka at-tathbita fil umur. Oh Allah, I ask you to be steadfast in your commands. Wa 'azimat ar-rushd. And to have a strong resolve. And so I'll write out the translation and the dua for you guys, inshallah, in the comment section below. Recognize that your food itself, when you in Ramadan, to facilitate your acts of worship, in your suhoor, don't have simple carbs and sugars and things like that, and juices and whatnot. Stay away from all of these things. Have a high fat, high protein meal in the morning. That actually it will spike your insulin less, and it will sustain you for a lot longer throughout the day. It will fill your stomach better. Breaking your fast at the end, as we mentioned earlier, don't go to excess. The way that you should break your fast, according to the sunnah of the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, break it with dates, 3 or 5 or 7 dates. I shared a picture on my Instagram with the dates with cucumbers, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to love combining dates with cucumbers. So you should read the caption on that. So you can have dates with a piece of cucumber, but have 3 or 5 or 7 dates. And then and water, or you can have it with milk. But then after that, get up and go and pray Maghrib. Don't sit down and have a full meal. Let Maghrib pass, and then go and pray. You'll be full stomach. You'll be lazy. You'll be a bit of a hyperglycemic shock from all the food. Have your dates. What that will do is it will kind of kick-start your digestive system, so that it gets ready. It allows your body time to release the right hormones and things that it needs to release to digest the food. And it will send and the thing is about the fork is always faster than the brain. So we will always eat faster than our stomach is able to send signals to our brain to tell us that we're full. So when you have your dates and have your water and you go pray, by the time you come back, you will notice that you won't eat as much. So make sure you engage in that practice and give preference to your prayer. Think about what happens when you fill your stomach up too much. You're unable to actually engage in prayer with the focus that you need to focus on. So have just sufficient food to keep your back straight and focus on just getting close to Allah. The more you feed the terrestrial aspect of your being, the more you will constrict your spiritual aspect of your being. Let's see. Idle time. So when you're idle time, you have queues, you have travel time in the car, things like that. This is a great time for you to listen to Quran, review your memorization if you've memorized Quran. If you can, memorize a little bit more if you haven't finished memorizing the Quran. Learn specific du'as. Alhamdulillah, there are resources available online. What is the du'a when you go to sleep? What is the du'a when you get up? What is the du'a after you eat? The du'a when you enter the bathroom, du'a after you get out of the bathroom, du'a when you exit the house, du'a when you're traveling. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do where your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be a constant and consistent relationship back and forth. You want blessing in your life, you have to restore your ties of kinship. If you have any problems with relatives where you sever ties of kinship, especially with your parents or with your siblings, I'm not telling you to put up with abuse here. There are some isolated cases where this is genuinely a very problematic situation, but you have to do what's within your means to make sure that you're clear with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as I mentioned before, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. If there was an abusive situation, that's an exception. But a lot of the problems people have with family and with kinship is just nafsani. It's egos. And somebody has to get rid of their ego, has to overcome their ego for any reconciliation to take place. Be the first one. Be the first one to do that. And try to put away they call it social media. It's actually anti-social media. Every time we have the phone with Twitter, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, all of that stuff, there's a healthy relationship with this stuff and there's an unhealthy relationship. And by and large, most of us have an unhealthy relationship with it. So my recommendation to you all is when Isha comes, make that a marker to put your phone on airplane mode. Do not engage, unless you're a physician or like a surgeon, someone who has to be gotten a hold of and be at the phone like right away for safety reasons and things like that. Those people are accepted from this. But all of us, the rest of us, we don't need to have our phone on all the time. The world is not going to collapse if they can't get a hold of you. So put your phone on airplane mode after Isha, and the rest of the evening, make that about the Quran, make that about your studies if you need to study, make that about being with family, make that about dhikr, make that about praying. That's what you need to make it up on. Take your apps for social media, at least during the month of Ramadan, and delete them from your phone. You don't need them. You don't need Instagram on your phone during the month of Ramadan. You don't need Facebook. You don't need all the stuff. Delete it from your phone if you can, and restrict your use to the desktop. That way, only when you have your laptop or your desktop, you can come and then it's like, all right, I'm going to check, and that's it. Restrict. Give yourself restrictions. And the best way to do this is to actually, as I mentioned at the start, you have your calendar, your daily routine that you know what you do. Pick a block of time in your day. If you need to do it once or twice, just pick a time and say, this is the time when I'm going to check my email and the time when I'm going to check my WhatsApp. And this is the only time I'm going to check my WhatsApp. Otherwise, I'm not checking anything else, and I'm just going to do it. So this way you are trying to become more present in the real world with people that are around you. So I highly recommend you guys do that during this month. Transductive acts of worship. So charity. When you give, it actually, we know that it lowers depression, which is really interesting findings. It helps improve the sense of well-being. Volunteering, giving out. People actually benefit more from giving than from taking. So pick a charity, pick a volunteering organization that you can volunteer for. Do something during this month that you know you can sustain and you can do, and commit to it for this month. Launch Good, I think, has a program now where you can give every single day. You can sign up so that they can give a preset amount on your behalf to different charitable organizations that they obviously check and confirm their legitimacy. And you could do that for the whole day. He, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he was giving all the time, kind of jawadan. He used to give all the time, and people used to go around telling us, like, go to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Said he gives he gives the giving of someone who is never afraid to be in poverty. And he sallallahu would go for months without having fire lit up in their house to have meat, because he just gives people. Somebody gifted him a cloth, a shirt that he wanted to have. Thanks, Juwairiya. She sent this link for Launch Good here on for the end of this book club. He sallallahu had the shirt. Somebody came and asked for the shirt from the Prophet and he needed that. So he sallallahu gave the shirt that he needed to this person. So this companion, he got rebuked. They said to him, you know that he sallallahu needs this shirt. Why did you take it? And he said, I wanted it to be my kafan when I went to the grave. And that's actually what happened. It was his funeral shroud when he died. So out of blessing, he wanted the blessing of the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam on his body. So he sallallahu was giving without fear of poverty. We all need to actually embody this. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will not attain righteousness and excellence of your spiritual state until you give from that which you love. So you give to the point where it's like, I'm not saying it ends you up on the streets, but it has to hurt. it has to give you a little bit of fear of, am I going to be able to afford something now, like that I feel like I need? Most of the things that we get, we don't even need. But let's just say that's something that you really, really want to have. And now you're now concerned about not being able to afford it because you're giving in charity. I guarantee you, Allah will exchange you multiple folds over. If that's what you need to do to give, that's the motivation, Bismillah. Otherwise, an even higher thing to motivate you is seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be pleased with you. You are somebody that is beneficial to the people. And expand your concept of giving. People think that giving is only for people with money. That's not necessarily the case. So if you are someone with, you're a teacher, maybe you can volunteer your services and tutor people that are unable to afford tutoring services. There are a lot of kids that are struggling for whatever reason, and their parents don't have the funds to pay for a tutor. There are organizations that you can connect with who you can volunteer your time for. You're a physician, maybe it's time for you to go and volunteer with Médecins Sans Frontières, the Doctors Without Borders, and go into areas of underserved areas so that you can help people. Ophthalmologists, my God, if I were an ophthalmologist, I'll be like every couple months down in Africa somewhere so that I can cure all these cataract cases, because people are losing their sights and are able to restore them with a very simple procedure. So imagine being the person behind that, giving people their sight back. So expand your concept of charity. It's not just about money. It's also with things that you can do, volunteering your time. If you're someone who's strong physically and you know that some family is moving and they need help with movers, maybe helping them move with that. Okay, go lift up, instead of going to the gym that day, volunteer your body so that they can go and go lift some furniture. So give your time, give your money, sign up to volunteer, all these things. Charity, there is a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that charity is even better than i'tikaf, to stay in the masjid, which is a highly virtuous thing to do, especially the last 10 days of Ramadan. Highly recommended that you go to the masjid, you're fasting, you are going to dedicate that time for, and you're going to take time away from work, you're not going to exit the masjid, you're going to stay, you're going to recite Quran, pray at night, do all these things. But if that time happens to be also a time where you have an opportunity to go and serve some people who are in need, that's even higher with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than just going to the masjid. This religion is really beautiful because it encompasses so many different things. Let's see. We already talked about the Quran. I mentioned to you earlier that when it comes to the Quran, don't overburden yourself. Give yourself goals that you can realize. And finally, I want to give you a piece of advice as we close off here, and I go maybe to some of your questions. When it comes to the acts that you do in Ramadan, take your daily routine and the things that you're engaged in for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever they may be. They could be ritual acts of worship, they could be volunteer, they could be whatever it is. Take an action during the month of Ramadan and commit yourself to it and say, like, okay, now that I've done all of these extra things for the month of Ramadan, but now I want to be a different person. I'm no longer the same person. There's a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ says, أَحَبُّ الْأَعْمَالِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَدْوَمُهَا وَإِنْ قَلَّ. The most beloved actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that which is most consistent, even if it's little. So it could be as little as just making that dua that I mentioned to you at the end of your prayer. Let's say that you just get up usually after you finish your obligatory prayers, you just leave and you don't do anything. Well, maybe now it's time for you to start saying, I'm going to commit to sitting down for 3, 4, 5 minutes. I'm going to make that dua and I'm going to do my tasbih. You'd be surprised at how much more your physical being will be able to do. Your material kind of pursuits will succeed and flourish when your spiritual being, your spiritual side is much more powerful, building up those spiritual muscles. So if it happens to be committing yourself to an hour a week to tutoring the underprivileged, those who are unable to afford tutors, and you're a teacher and you're really good at what you do, and you decide, I'm just going to give some time to people who can't afford tutors and I'm going to teach them so that they can be better. I mean, any good that person does in the future as a consequence of having been tutored by you, that's all for you as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to diminish what they get, but will add that to your record. If it happens to be a charitable thing, there's nothing better than committing to sponsoring an orphan. So maybe find an organization that sponsors orphans that's legitimate, and you check them out, make sure that that there's no funny business happening and they're accredited, and maybe now it's time for you to spend that $20, $25 a month to sponsor an orphan where they can establish a relationship between you and the family that you're sponsoring from. Things like that. Just pick something, whatever it is. Just pick one act that you're going to commit to, and make sure that this is an act that you are now going to commit to for the rest of your life, that you're not going to stop this unless there's something extraneous to you that overwhelms you that now you can't do it. But otherwise, make the intention that I'm going to do this act and I'm going to commit to it. You really have to establish a relationship with the Quran to go beyond the month of Ramadan. So if you don't happen to recite the Quran on a daily basis, maybe divide your time of the Quran during the month of Ramadan for, this is the time that is now going to last beyond Ramadan, and I would recommend do that in the morning. So let's say that you're somebody who doesn't normally recite the Quran day to day. You do it scattered, once in a while. Make a commitment that, okay, after Subh or before Subh, whatever time that's convenient for in the morning, but definitely do it in the morning, because that's when you'll have the most energy and that's when you'll be able to stick to it more. Let's say that you do it after prayer. Sit down and just recite 5 verses. At most, do a page. And just do that. That's now your normal daily practice that you will stick to. In the evening, before you go to sleep, and let's say that you made a commitment, you made a goal that I'm going to do a full khatam of the Quran in Ramadan. Make that portion, the juz that you recite, in the evening. That's your commitment for Ramadan. But have some act. I don't care what it is. I don't know what works for you. You know yourselves better. Pick something, stick to it, and just tell yourself and intend and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more importantly, that this is something I'm going to stick to. Allah, please facilitate it for me. Allow me to stick to this for the rest of my life, and you will notice wondrous things in your life. And this is something that you should do every Ramadan. Personally, I've been toying around with my own kind of things that I wanted to do. It's like, because Ramadan is a point of transformation. People talk about New Year's resolutions. We have Ramadan resolutions that we actually resolve, azima now, to stick to and continue with. This religion is, we can go on and on. We've already gone on for an hour and a half, which is half an hour more than I wanted to go on to, but alhamdulillah, this is the way that we go here. So I hope this was beneficial to you guys. I'm just going to quickly look through. If there's any questions, I'll answer those before we close off. Salah, what is the meditation application name? So that's Headspace. Question 2, also, could you please give the name of the Adhan application? The Adhan application. Well, the one that I use, it's literally Adhan, A-T-H-A-N. That's on my phone. The other one that you can download, there's an app from, it's MacBook, so there's an app that you can download. What is it called, actually? I'm not sure what it's called. It's, I don't want to close off this window, but it's a free Adhan app. And what I did for the Adhan app on my computer is I downloaded the different maqamat, the different scales that the Adhans are made based on the different prayer from Turkey. And so now every Adhan on my computer is a different scale indicating the prayer itself, which is a beautiful thing to do. And it kind of renews guidance. Yes, Yumna, Jazakallahu khairan. Yes, guidance. Download that one, and then you can upload the MP3s for the different Adhans. And what I did was I went online and I searched for Dhuhr Adhan in Turkey, Asr Adhan in Turkey, Maghrib, Isha, Fajr. And then I saved the MP3 and I uploaded it to the thing. And so now my Adhans on my computer differ based on the prayer time, which is a beautiful thing. It has an impact that you don't really realize without having it. How do you balance being anxious about not making the most of Ramadan and generally being excited and happy on Ramadan approaching? I feel more stressed than anything else. Just reflect on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's beautiful. Umar al-Khattab, this is the beauty of Umar al-Khattab after he was transformed. When he became a Khalifa, he was a balanced person. That's why Allah put him in that position. Before that, he was still a little bit imbalanced. When the Prophet ﷺ passed on, we all know the story. Umar al-Khattab got really angry, drew his sword out, and he said, if anybody says he died, I'm going to kill them. He was unbalanced, and it was Abu Bakr Siddiq was balanced, and he reminded people what's really at stake here. And that's why he was the leader of the Muslims after the Prophet ﷺ passed on. And when Abu Bakr Siddiq passed on, Umar al-Khattab also was balanced. It was the time now he became balanced, and then he became the leader. There was a narration in which Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu is related to have made a mistake. He, I think it was cloudy, if I recall the narration correctly. It was cloudy. He broke his fast too early. He thought it was Maghrib time because it was just too dark. And so he broke his fast in Ramadan. And then a companion came and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm breaking my fast." It's like Asr. We're barely, not even close. And Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu basically just shrugged his shoulders like, I just made a mistake. It's fine. Like, he'll make it up. Yeah, it's a mistake that he made. He continues on fasting the rest of the day, stopped eating. But it's like, it's wrong. It's no big deal. You know, Allah is the reflection on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the beauty of when you have taqwa and you know the names, taqwa, if you have it through knowledge of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the state of stress about it will kind of dissipate a little bit. So I would just say, whatever you do in Ramadan, you're going to improve. You're going to do things that you're not doing during the rest of the year. Allah ties up the shayateen for you so that you have an easier time to do these things, and you'll find a transformation. You should be thankful for that. And just establish your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that's like, okay, it's okay, I'm just going to do what I can. Allah, please facilitate for me what will make you happy with me. The reason we get stressed, you know, Allah tells us in Surah Al-Muddathir, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا. Your initial state, Allah created you to be anxious. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. When evil afflicts you, when bad states afflict you, you get in despair. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. And when you have good things and you're in a state of abundance, you start to withhold. Because again, you're anxious, you're worried about losing things. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. Except for those who are in a state of prayer, connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ دَائِمُونَ. And those who are in constant connection, constant prayer with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. And they have a known right within their wealth for the one who's asking and the one who's been deprived. They give to people. So if you want to alleviate your state of anxiety, what you need to do is you need to give. You need to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and just give from what you have and relax about what you can't do, because you have to know that at the end of the day, this is Allah's domain, and you have to ask for His permission to do things. But set for yourself goals that you know you can realize, first of all. Let's say that you know for yourself that I can do 2 pages a day of Quran. I know that I can do that. Okay, if you know you can do that, write 2 pages. And then on the days during Ramadan where you feel you can do more, take advantage of that. Capture those moments and do more during that time. And the days that you feel like I'm barely doing the 2 pages, just do the 2 pages. Alhamdulillah, you've said yourself that. We work based on when we have these clear set guidelines and goals, we're more likely, research has shown, you're more likely to achieve things when you write them down and you set yourself limits. But if you don't write them down and you leave it kind of up in the air, airy-fairy, there's no deadlines, there's no parameters, there's no goals being set in place, you won't achieve much. I hope that answers it for you. Be excited, be happy, be thankful. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant you the time to witness it. Ask Allah to forgive you. Ask Allah to facilitate things for you. But relax. Thank you for mentioning this. Let's see. I said no, it makes me... I'm just looking through questions in Facebook now. In Sydney, half-yearly exams called NAPLAN will happen in the middle of Ramadan. Teachers are concerned for their Muslim students that will be fasting, that it will affect them. What do you do in that case? What do you say to parents? Well, it depends. Are these kids past puberty? If they are past puberty, then it's an obligation for them to fast. And what I would remind the parents is, number one, in Sydney, I think it's like 12 hours total is the fast time. So it's not that big of a deal. If you get up in the morning and have your food and be well nutritioned, you'll be fine. Exams is not a valid excuse to break your fast. The Sahaba were literally in battle in Ramadan, 17th of Ramadan, Badr. So this is why it's Ayyam al-Ma'dudat. It's not that we magnify, like I said at the beginning of this, we magnify things and we make them into a bigger deal than they really are. So I just remind people of the parents, the Muslim parents, if they're not past puberty, these kids, they're not obligated to fast. So they can break their fast that day. But if they are obligated, I'll just remind them of the immensity of the month and the obligation, and maybe share with them resources to show them that this is not as to try to quell their anxieties a little bit. I think the problem is people focus on material gains and they forget about the actual the big picture here. Do people, I mean, it's again khuliqa halu'a, we're state anxiety. We forget, we rely upon ourselves. The second you rely upon yourself, you've lost. But if you rely upon Allah, you're going to win. We have medical students, we have surgeons, we have physicians, we have people engaged in very difficult circumstances, and they're fasting and they're going through just fine. A little exam is never hurt anybody. Do people who cannot pay zakat have to pay fidya on missed fasts? Zakat is a separate thing. So there's so zakat is two things. You have zakatul fitr and you have zakatul mal. Zakatul fitr is the one that is at the end of Ramadan, which is sunnah mu'akkada, which is a pre-calculated amount. Not sure if I think it's around like $15 in Australia now, or $20 per family member, and that's a set amount that's given upon everybody for the needy. Zakatul mal is you have to meet nisab. You have to meet a minimum amount of wealth that is marra alayhi al-hawl, that has a whole lunar year pass over it before the actual money that is due on it, 2.5%, and that's a separate thing. Missed fast, the fidya on missed fast from the Maliki school, if you are unable to pay, so first of all, it has to be a deliberately missed fast, that there's no valid excuse for it. If it does have the kafara on it, or the fidya, then you have either feeding the masakin, or I'm sorry, I said no, Muhammad, or fasting 60 days. If you can't fast at all, and you're someone who has an actual condition, I'll have to get back to you on that one, because it escapes my mind for what the actual ruling on that one. But there is a dispensation for those folks. I mean, there's a hadith in which the man came and he was the poorest of the poor, and he ﷺ gave him the fidya, gave him the money, and he said, go feed. And he said, nobody is more in poverty than me. And he ﷺ said, all right, then you have it. So there's mercy in this religion. It's not that difficult. How do you stop comparing yourself to your past self and the Ramadans that were truly transformative? I feel like I'm trying to replicate the best Ramadan, and it never happens. In terms of the intensity of feeling close to Allah rather than the quantity of ibadah. Well, number one, we know that from psychology research, we always have an overestimation of our past. We forget the downtimes and we remember the good times, and that actually warps our perception of how good we were in the past. So I would potentially not pay as much weight to that. Secondly, the past is the past. You really have to reflect on your present self. And so that's just a matter of contemplation and reflection. The more you compare yourself to the past, Allah judges you based on your current state. It's not, this is the thing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's outside of space and time. This is an aqidah point. This is why I encourage you guys from the start, you need to study your aqidah. Allah's past is beyond space. He transcends space and time. So He doesn't compare you to your past self and your good self and all that. He looks at your current state. Where are you at right now? And so that's what you have to remind yourself. Where am I at right now? And what do I need to do right now to make this the best thing that I can make it out to be? What is the ruling regarding reading the Quran during menstruation? That is daily habitual reading study that one does. So the Maliki position is that because there's actually a dispensation given to the women, because if you go up to 15 days, it makes it much more difficult to keep remembering or revising the Quran, because you'll just continually forget it. So there's actually a dispensation for you to recite the Quran for terms of revising. You can revise the Quran. Make sure you pick up a copy that is not fully a Quran though. So a recommendation that the shuyukh tell us is maybe pick up one of those tafasir, like you have the tafsir on the sides. That is not considered a copy of the Quran anymore. If you have the text itself is a combination of, or the ones with the English and the Arabic beside each other, for example, that's not a Quran anymore. That's a tafsir. And because it's tafsir, it doesn't have the ruling of you can't touch it. I hope that makes sense, Aisha. So if it's just purely a Quran, that one is off limits for regular recitation. You have a disposition in the Maliki school for revising it for the sake of memorization, and that's it. But encourage for you to pick a copy that has something in addition to it, it's like tafsir, so that it's not, so you can stay away from the difference in opinion that way. Let's see. Nilo journaling. Yeah. Going back to the Suruba, going back to the sisters using methods to still their monthly cycles. Now I've never done it, but I understand why they do it. Ramadan is special to us, and we feel left out when we cannot be fasting in it. Fasting outside Ramadan is not the same, so is also an emotional reason. That's true, but you got to remember, you're not the only ones that are during menstruation that are not fasting. You also have people that have chronic disease that precludes them from fasting. They have to take medications, for example, that makes it impossible for them to fast without harming themselves. The specialty of Ramadan is not just about fasting Ramadan. So if you're in menstruation, that doesn't mean you can't engage in other actions. You can still go and do charitable work. You can volunteer. You could do this. You can live the spirit of Ramadan without necessarily engaging in the fast. And you have to give them the spiritual significance to the fact that you are not fasting because of your menstrual cycle, because it's part of the Sharia. It's part of the sacred law. So it has a sanctity in itself that this is a time when I'm not doing this because Allah said so, and it's in the Quran as well. So it has a spiritual significance, and we have to revive that kind of conception. It's unfortunate that we look at these things as bad, and it's taken away from the spirit of this. On the contrary, the spiritual significance of the month does not diminish because you're unable to fast. You have to reflect on what the reason is for your inability to fast. Gul, what's going on? What's going on? Zainab, would it be possible to share the post-prayer dua that was cited earlier? So the dua is Allahumma inni as'aluka at-tathbita fil umuri wa 'azimata ar-rushdi wa as'aluka shukra ni'matika wa husna 'ibadatika wa as'aluka qalban saliman wa lisanan sadiqan wa khuluqan mustaqima wa astaghfiruka lima ta'lam wa as'aluka min khayri ma ta'lam wa a'udhu bika min sharri ma ta'lam innaka anta 'allamul ghuyub. That's the dua in Arabic. I'm going to have to translate it and write it down in English for you, inshallah, and put it down here. There is Tamima, Adhan app does not provide full Adhan. Hisnul Muslim is a good app, sure, yeah. And Adhan apps are different. I mean, you use the one that works for you. It's up to you guys, however, which one you like. Salah, one question which is not related to this topic, sorry. Could you please give me some ulama names for my wife, which understand only Arabic and a little bit French? I would like her to benefit the same knowledge that I found in English with your webinar, Durus and podcast. The only scholar that I know that you can, I'm talking traditional here, that also does French, which is like, he's one of the people that I'm praying that I get to meet one day and sit with and study with. Sheikh Saeed Al-Kamili from Morocco. There are videos online of him visiting France and giving lectures in French and addressing questions in French. So he's Arab, he's Moroccan. He does, when he teaches, it's all in Arabic, like Fusha. So sometimes he does go into the Darija, the Moroccan dialect, but he comes back into the Arabic because he's teaching in like a hadith setting. So he does the whole thing in proper Fusha Arabic, and he's got lectures in French. So hopefully she can benefit from that. I don't know. I'm sure there are other scholars. There's another more French convert, but his name escapes me. He went and studied in Mauritania, and I think his lessons are available in French online. I'm gonna have to look him up. More Arabic, Sheikh Saeed Al-Kamili. Sheikh Saeed Al-Kamili is all Arabic to listen to. Who else? He's actually the one I listen to the most. Yeah, he's the one I listen to the most now. Do you guys have any more questions? Anything else from Endo's book club? Because if not, then we can conclude this session, inshallah, which we went on to literally 2 hours instead of the hour that was scheduled for this. But I hope it was beneficial. I hope you guys have taken some notes from this. There are resources online that you can pick up for agendas and like goal setting and things like that. But I really recommend you go through and you sit down with the and do the goal setting and write down things. Write down your goals and have it, put it up. Like you see this thing here. تعلمت العلم لنفسي. I got that custom made. This is a statement from Imam Malik. I learn knowledge from myself. I look at this and it reminds me every time I look at it that no matter what I do, all of this is to save myself. So that this is my means, my own means to try to, mitigate the ostentation, the showing off. It's like you're seeking this to get fame or whatever. This is my way of doing it. It's like you're going to go to your grave by yourself and Allah's going to ask you about your own affairs. So do something like that for yourselves. Put something up. Put a calendar up, put your goal setting, do whatever, like put a schedule and follow that and be consistent and don't overwhelm yourself right off the start. Start with small things and don't belittle a small action. لا تحقرن شيئا من العمل شيئا. Do not belittle any action that you do because it could be the one little thing. Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, as magnificent as he was and as amazing as he was, when he was martyred and he was seen in a dream by one of the companions afterwards, he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, ma fa'al Allahu bik? Oh, commander of the believers, what did Allah do with you? And he's like, Amir al-Mu'mineen, what? Like, we're done with these titles. No more. I saw my actions like a big throne, but they were about to collapse. It was so flimsy. But then there was one thing that I did in my life. They tied a bird and they were basically playing with it, and the bird looked like it was in a torturous state. So I went and I freed that bird. That bird came and saved my throne. That's Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. So don't belittle any action that you don't think like, oh, I'm only doing this little dua and that's it and I'm done and like this is not enough. Allah doesn't want a lot from you. Allah just wants, if you come to Allah with just a small little step, Allah will come to you a whole arm span. If you come to Allah walking as in the hadith, He will come to you running. There's nothing that you can do that's going to be too small. The key is consistency. Just stick to it. Any tafsir series online you would recommend? English? Not that I am aware of, to be honest with you, that I would say this is like a traditionally sourced English fully like audio. I'm thinking you're asking for, correct? Yeah, I don't know, Joydia. I'm not aware of. Maybe there is something. I mean, I know there are scattered kind of ones. Like Sheikh Hamza has like Tafsir Surah Al-Balad and Tafsir Surah Al-Hujurat and like scattered surahs like that. But I'm not aware of like a consistent tafsir from start to finish of the Quran, all audio, all available in English that you can go to, which has been an amazing project for one of the scholars to engage in. It'll bring a lot of benefit. But right now, I'm not aware of one, unfortunately. All right, I think we are going to conclude this. Jazakumullahu khairan. Ramadan Mubarak, ahead of time. May Allah grant us all the opportunity to witness the month, make us all safe, make it an opportunity for us to get closer to Him, inshallah. Grant you facilitation in all of your acts of worship. Make it a point of transformation in your lives to become better people, closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, elevate your ranks, and show you the reality of this world for what it is. That all of this is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's about establishing a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I hope that by the end of Ramadan, inshallah, you experience that. I ask you, please include me in your dua, include my family in your dua, include my wife in your dua as well. Barakallahu feekum. And inshallah, we'll reconnect with the Andalus Book Club. We'll go through Wael Halak's Restating Orientalism after Ramadan. My recommendation to you during the month, put down all these books and just open up the Quran, and any books that you read during this time, as the shuyukh tell us, If you're going to read anything other than the Quran or the seerah of the beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the shama'il, the characteristic descriptions and the physical description of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, read things that to do with the purification of the heart. Because that's really what's going to matter at the end of the day. Allah's not going to ask you about your degree. Allah's not going to ask you about what halaq and what he said. He's going to ask you about your heart and what you did to make it better. So make it about that, inshallah. Barakallahu feekum, and we will catch up with you in a month, inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum.